I'm Bill Miles with the Hilton Head Island Bluffton Chamber of Commerce, and we're so glad that you've joined us this morning. We hope that this will be one of the most informative hours that you have during your work week. As we get started, certainly want to give a shout out to the Beaufort County Channel for, again, broadcasting this, as well as several other Facebook Live partners that are doing it as well, and also those of you who are dialing directly into the chamber. We appreciate that. What a great Thanksgiving we had. The weather was perfect, and now we're moving on into the rest of the year. 24 shopping days left until Christmas, and so I know that you'll want to get out and be shopping local, just as you did for Small Business Saturday. There's so much going on in our region, our nation, and our state, and we're really fortunate today to have another stellar lineup with us that are going to be talking with us today. And I'm really pleased to have back with us our first guest, and a guy that does so much and is so well respected all around the country. He's one of the voices that doesn't just discuss policy, but he's one of those that helps create it. And when you help create it and discuss it, that's an effective way to go about it. So, as we like to say, when he speaks, Washington listens. And Neil Bradley is the Executive Vice President, as well as the Chief Policy Officer and the Head of Strategic Advocacy at the nation's most powerful business organization, and that's the United States Chamber of Commerce. And Neil is kind enough to be with us today to brief us on what's happening in the halls of Congress, as well as talk a little bit about the infrastructure bill and several other things that Neil and I have discussed that we thought would be important to share with each of you today. Neil, great to see you. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's great to be with you. It's great to be with everyone, particularly at this busy time of year. Bill scared me a little bit when he reminded us all that we only have 24 days of shopping left. I've got to get on that at some point this week, but it's nice to be able to join you and actually bring a little bit of good news for a change. Too often good news is in short supply in our nation's capital, but the business community had an enormous achievement just about a month ago with enactment of the bipartisan hard infrastructure bill. This is a bill that continues our traditional federal highways, road and bridge and transit programs, but also for the first time in really a couple decades, makes significant new investments in our ports, in our airports, in the crumbling bridges, in broadband, particularly for rural and underserved areas. It makes investments in rail transport, makes investments in water and wastewater systems. These are things that America traditionally had led in, that were the envy of the world, but frankly had suffered from underinvestment for several decades, and had really put in the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage globally and held back our economic growth. So it's rare these days that we get bipartisan legislation or legislation that brings together business and labor, but this is one of those pieces of legislation. It's now the law of the land, and we'll actually begin seeing some of the impact from it when we begin the spring and summer construction seasons across this country. Importantly, most of the money, almost all of it, in fact, close to 90%, will actually be controlled by state governments. So states will be making the decisions about which projects get funded and which projects go first. But this will give them the ample running room to begin addressing all of those hard infrastructure needs that we have in our economy. We're actually preparing some fact sheets that will be available later next week on each of kind of the core program areas, who controls the purse strings on it, and when we expect the money to flow, because we think it's going to be really important for local business leaders like your chamber to work with state policy officials to make sure that investment goes where it's going to deliver the best economic return for your community. And what we know is that the needs of communities differ. And so a one size kind of a fits all approach, whether that's from from Washington or from state capitals doesn't make as much sense as locally driven economic development. We also know that we're seeing the consequences of what happens when we fail to invest in the current supply chain shortage. Later today, I'm joining the National Governors Association for a discussion on the current state of the supply chain, what it means for the holiday shopping season, and what we should be doing going forward. There's some good news. The ports seem to, particularly on the West Coast, the Port of Los Angeles, the Port of Long Beach, we do seem to see some improvements in cargo moving off ships and out of the port terminals. In particular, for larger retailers, they've been able, simply because of volume and efficiency from volume, to move more of their cargo containers out of the ports and get them to important destinations. But small and mid-size retailers and manufacturers in particular continue to suffer from the supply chain kinks. There are a lot of reasons driving the current supply chain crisis. Part of it is COVID related, and the fact that buying patterns shifted. We had a surge in consumption as the pandemic began to ease. Containers weren't where they were supposed to be. The pandemic exacerbated a labor shortage that already existed, particularly with truck operators. And all of those things kind of created the perfect storm. But it's also true that some of the problems pre-existed COVID, that we weren't making investments in our ports, that we operate, particularly on the West Coast, some of the most inefficient ports in the world because we haven't made investments in automation, because we haven't accommodated Panamax ships as appropriately as we should, that we suffered from those worker shortages that existed even beforehand, that we weren't investing in automation kind of across the supply chain. And so when I address the Governors Association later today, the things I'm going to be suggesting is that obviously we're taking steps to work through the current crisis, but how do we prevent this from happening again? And the three things that I'm going to recommend to them is, one, that now that we have the capital, thanks to that infrastructure bill, the $17 billion investments in our ports, the investments in roads and transit and rail, and now that we have a lot more private capital, frankly, ready to invest, we actually have to put it to good work. And that means permitting reform. The federal government took some important steps in that infrastructure bill of streamlining the permitting process. One federal decision maker who's the point of contact, a 2-year shot clock for approving or not approving projects. But state and local governments play an important role here as well. And frankly, we need greater competition amongst the states for improving the permitting process so we can take this capital that we now have available and we can improve the physical infrastructure. Second, we have to be focused on the workforce. This is a problem not just in the supply chain, but much more broader in our economy. We have a record, 10.4 million open jobs. Tomorrow, the U.S. Chamber is going to release some data that I'll preview for you a little bit here today on the state of our labor force and the possibility of getting people back into the workforce. The sad reality is that today, there are 2.3 million fewer people in the labor force. And by labor force, I mean people who are working or available to work than there was 2 years ago pre-pandemic. So we have an increased number of job openings and a smaller pool of people available to fill those open jobs. There's some good news in the data actually for South Carolina. You're actually one of 13 states where the labor force is slightly bigger today than it was 2 years ago. But at the same time, you've had a 63% increase in the number of job openings. And so you have almost 2 job openings available for every individual who's looking for work today. That is not a recipe for alleviating a tight labor market. And you see it in the quits rates. South Carolina, like the rest of the nation, is hitting records in terms of the number of people who are voluntarily quitting their job because they know there is another job available for them. South Carolina hit 3.2% in the most recent numbers. And so if we're going to address this problem, both to address the supply chain issues, but also to address our larger concerns on economic growth and supporting our economy, then we're going to have to grow the size of the pie. That, as I'll tell the governors, truckers competing with construction companies for the same worker isn't going to leave our economy better off. Instead, we have to figure out how to get those workers off the sidelines and back into the workforce. The new survey data we'll release tomorrow shows that that's actually could be quite difficult. We surveyed individuals who had full-time employment prior to the pandemic, who lost their job during the pandemic, but have yet to return to work. And 1 in 5 of those individuals tell us they're not looking at all. 50% tell us that they're not eager to return to work. Almost 50% say that there's almost no chance that they return to work within the next 6 to 9 months. And so we know that we have to do more to get these people back into the workforce. We're going to challenge the federal government and states to really look at benefit programs, some combination of what the federal government is doing and what states are doing, are frankly making it so that individuals can find it unnecessary to actually have to return to the private workforce. It wasn't just the supplemental unemployment benefits. It's a combination of the monthly child tax credits that are now going out from the federal government, the enhanced health care benefits, the reduction in kind of the strings around the traditional unemployment programs. You know, we have some places in this country where you can get unemployment for being afraid to go back to work because of COVID. So unemployment, qualifying for unemployment based on fear, and other states where you can get unemployment because you don't want to get vaccinated. And so that is not a recipe for getting people back into the workforce, and we're going to have to take steps to address that. Ultimately, part of that solution is going to have to come from immigration as well. We're going to have to increase legal levels of immigration. We think the sensible place to start that could bring both Republicans and Democrats together is around legal work-based immigration. So increasing the number of seasonal workers that can come in and support destination communities like Hilton Head, increasing the number of high-skilled workers, H-1Bs, we call them, who can come in and help support technology companies and data growth. You know, in the UK, they're addressing the driver shortage actually by increasing the number of people who can immigrate into the UK as truck drivers. We frankly need to be looking at that as well. We recently raised that with the Secretary of Labor and invoking some of the authorities that they have to help us attract the talent that we need to help keep our economy growing. Ultimately, part of that has to be automation as well, whether that's driverless trucks or drones helping complete like the last miles of delivery in our supply chain, making the movement, clearing the path towards more automation at our ports and in our supply chain system is going to be crucial if we're going to be able to meet future demands. Let me turn now quickly to two last topics that are certainly top of mind for us today and maybe for you as well. The first is the state of the so-called reconciliation bill, or the Build Back Better bill, as the president and his allies call it in Congress. This is, as advertised, a nearly $2 trillion tax and spending package that doesn't focus on hard infrastructure, that's more on the soft side, as they call it. In reality, once you remove the budget gimmicks, it's closer to a $4 to $5 trillion spending package. It includes new transfer payments. Next year alone, $150 billion in tax refunds and transfer payments to individuals and families. We have a lot of concern that that's actually going to fuel inflation. If you look at the analysis, even from center-left groups who support the proposal, they concede that over the next couple of years, it's likely to increase inflationary pressures. This is exactly the wrong time to adopt policies that are going to push inflation higher. At the same time, it adopts policies to pay for this spending that principally come into effect in the 5 plus years from now. So what we call the second half of the budget window, 10-year budget window, things that happen in years 5 through 10, they're actually going to make US companies less competitive globally. So increasing how we tax companies relative to foreign competitors that will put them at a disadvantage for being American headquartered. One of the things it does is it removes some of the tax treatment for capital investment. So think about manufacturers or delivery services, people who are making major capital investments in new cars, new machinery, in new buildings. All of those things get disadvantaged under some of the new taxes in this bill. So it'll be easier for a company to be a consumer of services than it will be to be an investor in the capital investment that makes our economy more efficient. So there are a lot of reasons to oppose that bill. It did squeak through the House late, right before Thanksgiving. Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema have raised some of the same concerns that we've been raising, and we're hopeful that if the bill goes through, it'll look vastly different than what it looks like today, and that will address some of these uncompetitive tax issues, some of the inflationary pressures, as well as some of the changes that are just fundamentally bad for business, whether that's new fines and penalty authorities for federal agencies, or fundamentally changing for the first time in 70 years, the balance between business and labor when it comes to federal union laws. And so tipping that scale, putting the finger on the scale in favor of unions is not going to be good for growth or business or job creation. Finally, the last item, obviously on lots of our minds, is Omicron, the new COVID variant. Later today, Suzanne Clark, the president and CEO of the U.S. Chamber, is actually going to interview the Surgeon General. You can find information about that on the U.S. Chamber website about the emergence of the new variant. I think what we are likely to hear from the Surgeon General is that we frankly don't know a lot about this. If you've been following the news, you'll have one vaccine maker indicate that they believe that their vaccines will be largely effective against the new variant. Other vaccine makers have seemed to cast doubt on that. Some medical professionals suggest that the virus may spread more rapidly than previous variants, but that the trade-off is that it's actually less severe. That it causes very mild symptoms. You may have more transmission, but less severity of disease, which means less risk of death, less risk of overrun of our hospital system. All of which is a long way of saying we just don't know a lot. And one of the things that we're cautioning policymakers, particularly in the administration right now, is let's not jump to conclusions. Let's not adopt policies that aren't grounded in the science that could constrain our economic recovery. At the same time, let's be cautious and realistic about it. Let's prepare, but it's important that we get the facts before we adopt kind of major policy stances that could either restrict travel into the U.S. more than what was already done yesterday, or that propose new quarantine requirements. That's the latest being floated out of the CDC this morning, or, as some states have done, implement declarations of emergency and pull back on non-essential medical treatments in our healthcare facilities. So there's a lot to learn. We're confident we're going to learn it in the next couple of weeks, and that we should be guided in the decisions. Policymakers should be guided in the decisions that they make based on what they learn. So, Bill, let me stop there, and I'll turn back to you. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments or feedback, either on those topics or anything else.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive update. It's as always terrific, and we have several questions from people that have inquired, and I know you're busy. Just a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Happy to, please. Yeah. All
right. The first one will put you a little bit on the spot. James is asking what you think the odds are of the soft spending bill passing, and also when you would predict a vote taking place.
Senator Schumer said that he wants to have a vote before Christmas or before the end of the year. It's possible, but it's quickly trending against that. There's just too few days left and too many unresolved issues to get there. So not impossible, but I think that the trend lines are working against it. I think what we can say with certainty is that the bill that passed the House will not become law. That bill will be changed in many ways significantly in the US Senate, both as a result of the fact that it doesn't have the support of 50 senators and as a result of the fact that many of the provisions violate the special rules around the reconciliation process that they're using and will have to be stripped from the bill. But usually majorities with the president and unified government do find some way to get something done. Our hope is if that's the case, that it looks incredibly different from what we're facing today, and that's what we're fighting for.
All right, thank you. And Linda is asking, what steps does the U.S. Chamber endorse for putting people back to work?
Well, there's no single simple solution. So, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, I do think we have to look at right sizing kind of the suite of government benefit programs and recognizing that as they layer up onto each other, it's given people the option of not working. And so one of the things that our survey data showed, we actually asked people, we said, okay, you worked before, you lost your job, you're not working today. How are you getting by? How are you paying the bills? And what we found was that about half were tapping into a combination of COVID payments, expanded unemployment benefits, other new federal government payments like the child tax credit, and that the combination of all of those things meant that they were able to frankly to get by. I'm not suggesting that people are getting by in a comfortable lifestyle way, but they've managed to cobble together enough kind of government benefits to make that happen. So we have to look at that. We had this debate in the 1990s when welfare reform was considered, and I think it's probably going to be required that we have that debate now. We also know that for others, there are real barriers to returning to work. And one of the biggest barriers, particularly for working parents, is lack of accessible and affordable childcare. And so this is one where, frankly, some investments from the federal government and state governments on targeted assistance to help individuals access childcare, combined with some regulatory changes that can help expand the number of childcare providers and their ability to care for children, could actually help in getting people back to work. We know some people, particularly those who've been out of work for now close to 2 years, also need skills training. It doesn't mean that they need to go to community college for 2 years, or that it's another year out of work, but rapid employment training programs to get them back into the active workforce could be really important. And so some very targeted funding there we think makes sense. That's very different on both childcare and employment training than what's being proposed in that social spending bill. It's one of the reasons that we think it misses the mark.
All right, Neil, thank you. Thank you, Neil. And the next question is from Melissa. And Melissa's asking, what's the latest with raising the debt limit? And then also a second part of that, what can be done to prevent this chaos in the form of changing the mechanism to do so?
Yeah, so the Secretary of the Treasury says we are likely, she suggested that to be safe, we should raise the debt limit by December 15th. That is not the drop dead date. Most analysts expect that the drop dead date is later in the year to early January. Our hope is to avoid some of that chaos by getting it done before December 15th. There are cooperative discussions going on between Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell, where Democrats would provide the votes for doing it, but there wouldn't be any unnecessary procedural hurdles. I think Melissa's second part of that question is really the right one, because I think we will get through this period and get the debt limit raised. But every time we come a little bit closer to not getting it done, and we risk self-inflicted economic catastrophe. 220 some years, the US government has never defaulted on its debts. That's the reason we have such low borrowing costs. That's one of the reasons that the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. If we somehow default on that, we throw all of that into question. We raise borrowing costs for taxpayers. We raise borrowing costs for the private sector. It is a self-inflicted wound. So it's probably time that we actually change the debt limit, that we get rid of this requirement that Congress vote on it. It's not become a mechanism for controlling spending. It doesn't, the idea of it initially was it would help control spending. That clearly isn't working. So finding another mechanism to control spending without risking the full faith and credit of the United States is pretty essential. We have some ideas on what those mechanisms could look like. And we're talking with policymakers about how we might move to that once we get through this current debt limit increase.
Neil, we have enough questions to keep you here until lunchtime. However, we know you can't do that. But thank you. Thank you. And as I mentioned in Neil's introduction, when Neil speaks, Washington listens. And as you heard from Neil, he'll be speaking to the National Governors Association today. And we just appreciate you and all you do, your leadership, and taking out time to be with us periodically. It means a lot to us, Neil, and you're the best guy going out there. Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's always a pleasure to be with you and the team there. And happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
And one last thing, remember the team would always like to see you on Hilton Head Island. So that invitation is there, and we'd love to have you sometime.
It's funny, we're talking about our neighbors. We have brand new neighbors, and we've barely gotten to know them because they're down with their family's place in Hilton Head. And so my wife's been texting them about maybe we should all go down to Hilton Head and get to know our new neighbors.
That'd be a great place to meet. Well, thank you. Good luck for the rest of the day, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
All right. That was Neil Bradley, and so fortunate to have Neil with us this morning, and he's got quite a day ahead of him. And to think that we have one from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on our dial-in, but to be able to have two is really, really special today. And we've had Shop Small Business Saturday, we've had Cyber Monday, as well as Giving Tuesday. And one of the guys that's really behind Small Business Saturday has been our good friend, Tom Sullivan. And Tom is Mr. Small Business for America, and he serves as the Vice President of Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And Tom, we're glad to have you with us again, and with you and Neil tag teaming, our audience is in great shape today.
Oh, thank you, Bill. It's great to be with you this morning. It's also great to follow my boss, Neil. We really appreciate the partnership with Hilton Head Island and about 1,600 of your closest friends in the state, local, regional chambers of commerce who are our partners. I mean, I'll continue the good news that Neil focused on. He had focused on some legislative activity, both from a negative, trying to prevent President Biden's Build Back Better tax and spend legislation for taking the country in the wrong direction. But then on a positive, talking about how proud we are of the partnership with your Chamber of Commerce and others to get a hard infrastructure bill passed and enacted into law. So to continue in that positive message, Small Business Saturday was an enormous success. I certainly don't have to tell you, Hilton Head Island Chamber, you have been an official neighborhood champion with American Express since the Small Business Saturday start. And so this kind of bearing of thank you and bearing of good news certainly does not come as a surprise to all of you, but I'll give you some of the data that we've learned as recently as last night. And again, it is very, very positive. That data show, looking at my notes here, that there was sales of $23.3 billion. It's really amazing. Now, I think more importantly than that is answering the question of, well, how was Small Business Saturday compared to pre-COVID? And that's where the news is really, really good. It is up 18.9% from 2019. That really is tremendous. And taking it a little bit further than that, what we've seen with this Small Business Saturday that is unique from other Small Business Saturdays is this realization of the importance of shopping local and shopping small. I mean, sure, we know that folks turn out in droves to put presents under the Christmas tree. And we know that they turn out in droves for bargains, but that sensitivity of seeking out and shopping at small business is at an all-time high. American Express did a survey right after Saturday and showed that 79% of shoppers prioritized small business. And here's really what I find the most encouraging news is that 66% of those shoppers said that they are prioritizing shopping local and shopping small for the entire year because they realize how hard it has been for Main Street small business owners to survive. And Bill, I got to commend you and your team at your chamber, because you have actually emphasized the importance of shopping small, not just for the survival of Main Street, but also because, as your chamber has pointed out, 91% of small businesses give back to their communities. They give back through donations, contributions, and services to a total of over $6,600 per employer giving back to the community. And that certainly adds to the wealth of information that's saying that more folks are going to prioritize shopping small all year round. So really good news coming from Saturday. I think we've got an elongated holiday shopping season. It started earlier because there was a little bit of a panic about shipping delays and are we going to get there, and are the gift that we really want to buy maybe won't be on the shelf. I think that prompted a lot of folks to come out early. Small Business Saturday, we had fewer shoppers actually hitting the buy button or bringing their credit card to the register, but the overall sales were up, which is good news. And I think that that's going to be extended through the holidays. We will see an all-time record high of spending for this Christmas season, which generally is positive. Now, we are facing some inflationary pressure headwinds that is cause for concern, but hopefully with your help, we'll be able to push back against some of the tax and spending bills that will only exacerbate that inflationary pressure.
Tom, thank you for that update. While you were speaking, I had a text message from one of our listeners saying that listening to you and Neil should be required for all business students to hear what you gentlemen are saying. If you would talk about, we've got Steve is asking if you'd talk just a little bit about the supply chain and how that might be affecting the small businesses that you're hearing from.
Well, I mean, thanks for that question. It's been horrible. I work very closely with a number of small businesses who would love to have the luxury of purchasing their supplies and sourcing domestically, but they don't have that luxury. They're trying to get containers from Southeast Asia. And you're looking at costs. Traditionally, those costs were, I think, about $1,100 per container to get across from Southeast Asia. Now you're looking at container costs at peak at $14,000. And that's only to get the container anchored off of the ports at Long Beach. There's been some progress, but even once you get that container across the Pacific Ocean, a long way to go with delays. Now, the good news is that you've got an entire business community and government focused in on trying to relieve bottlenecks and open up that supply chain, those supply chain snags. But it's going to take a long time. I wish I could tell the viewers that these snags, these knots, these problems, these bottlenecks in the supply chain are going to be resolved before Christmas. It's just not the case. The supply chain challenges will last through 2022, and we're going to be. It's an all of chamber, and I certainly say that in conjunction with our chamber partners like Hilton Head. It's an all of chamber and an all of government effort to try to relieve those bottlenecks.
Tom, do you see one of our Donald is asking if you see a resurgence of American-made goods and less reliance on those manufactured goods coming from overseas due to the shipping and supply issues?
Bill, it's interesting. I wish it were so easy to say that if we got international shipping down, all of our problems would go away. But unfortunately, it's not. I mean, you still need truck drivers to get goods from one part of the United States to the other United States. I'm not telling you anything new. There's an enormous shortage of truck drivers. And so when Neil Bradley was talking about workforce shortages, that has existed even pre-pandemic. Some would say that it's been exacerbated by the pandemic because of this need for ship anywhere, receive anything now kind of mentality that has permeated throughout the United States. However, the focus towards domestic manufacturing, there is a renewed focus towards domestic manufacturing. I'll give one example. It isn't necessarily a small business example, but it's certainly something that we see on front page news. Chip manufacturers in the United States, all of our electronics that rely on silicon chips, we've been almost completely beholden to China to receive those chips. And there's been a necessity of turning inward to make sure that we have domestic production of silicon chips. And so we see silicon chip manufacturing plants being built in Texas and Arizona. That's not going to solve our problems this year or next year, but longer term, we think that there will be a resurgence of domestic manufacturing. And that's where it really kind of keys into what Neil had talked about, is that through all of these types of investments, we've got to make sure that the American permitting system is streamlined to incentivize businesses to create domestic manufacturing in the United States, and not so overburdensome with red tape as to push them away again to other countries where those supply chain challenges become exacerbated the further those goods and services are from the United States.
Tom, our next question is coming from Ann. And with the workforce challenges we're seeing, are you seeing an increase in entrepreneurship?
So thank you for that question. We are seeing a surge in entrepreneurship. It's really pretty amazing. And I'm going to be a data nerd for a second. So after the recession of 2008 and 2009, it took 10 years for there to be an uptick in new small businesses, not just new small businesses, but new employer businesses. What we've seen throughout COVID is it actually only took 2 months. It took 2 months for the growth of new likely employer businesses to start ticking up again, which is really tremendous. We are seeing an all-time surge in likely employer businesses. And this has been a long time challenge for the United States, is to get that trajectory of new business starts moving upward. It has been moving upward. It continues to move upward. It started with delivery and logistics. I mean, how many packages can Amazon and Uber Eats deliver? I mean, they needed help at the beginning of the pandemic, and entrepreneurs were there to solve the problem. Then it transitioned from delivery and logistics into online sales. Pre-pandemic, I think a lot of small businesses had a web presence that had a purchasing option as maybe an extra. It is now a necessity. To have an e-commerce component to your web presence is the necessity that has been amplified and sped up through the pandemic. And that has created all sorts of entrepreneurial opportunities. And so we have very, very good news about new business starts. And I can assure you, part of those new business starts are quality of life and quality of where these entrepreneurs want to live. And I can tell you, Bill, you're going to have a slew of new members of these new businesses who want to enjoy all of that Hilton Head has to offer, while at the same time growing their businesses, growing their communities, and building up through hiring more employees.
All right, Tom, thank you. Just like Neil, we have many more questions for you, but due to time, we've got to call it quits there. But also, I want to tell our listeners, as I've said before, that you do indeed put on your cape for small business each and every day. And we thank you for that, Tom. Also, when Tom speaks in Washington, people listen. And also, when Tom speaks, people around the country listen. So we appreciate your leadership. And one last thing, I want to give out a shout out to Tom. And Tom, what's your Twitter handle? I would encourage everyone to follow Tom on Twitter. He has great small business statistics, updates there that I would encourage you to check. And he's very active on Twitter with some really great information.
Thank you, Bill. And most importantly, I give updates into our inflatable Christmas Snoopy that has had some trouble this year. But my Twitter handle is @SmallBizPatriot. That's @SmallBizPatriot. And Bill, I'd love to close with just thanking you for your partnership. We couldn't have all of this positive news without the partnership that we have with your Chamber of Commerce. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. That was Tom Sullivan. And it's always a pleasure to have Tom on and the great information that he brings forth. I'll tell you, when I was learning the Greek alphabet at that time, I didn't think that I would ever be sitting in front of a camera discussing Omicron, I got to get that right, Omicron, and that variant, let alone speaking to the leading epidemiologist in South Carolina. And here back with us today is our really good friend and just a lady with tremendous knowledge and input to talk to us, to give us the latest, and that's Dr. Jane Kelly. Dr. Kelly is with DHEC, and she's here to help us understand this latest variant and other things. Welcome back, Dr. Kelly.
Well, thank you again for inviting me. I do want to touch on what's the state of COVID in South Carolina, talk a little bit about vaccine for kids ages 5 through 11, and update you on boosters, but I will talk about Omicron as well. Here's where we are in South Carolina. We had that huge surge in August and September, and that was associated with the Delta variant because the Delta variant spread more easily. That we then had 10 weeks of decreasing numbers of new cases per day. And more recently, where I've got that red arrow, we've sort of plateaued we suspect we will have a small surge after Thanksgiving. Once Omicron hits South Carolina, and it may be here already, and we just haven't detected it yet, we suspect that there'll be a surge just like we had with the Delta variant. And in a few minutes, I'll tell you why we think that. So in answer to that question, when can we take our masks off? You know, things were looking good that once we got past the holidays, that we might be able to ease some restrictions, but unfortunately the answer right now is not yet. Here is a screenshot of our vaccine dashboard where you can see the number of people and percentage of people in South Carolina who have had at least one dose of vaccine or who are fully vaccinated. The top row is for people aged 12 and older, and the bottom row includes all South Carolinians ages, including 5 and older. So if you look at everybody who is eligible for vaccine, meaning ages 5 and older, about 50% of South Carolina residents have completed vaccination. More than 30,000 children ages 5 and 11 in South Carolina have gotten their first dose of Pfizer vaccine. Some have even completed their vaccination. This busy graph is to show first, second, and third doses of vaccine given in South Carolina. And the top graph is going all the way back to December of 2020 when vaccine first became available. And then the bottom graph is looking at it more recently. The lighter blue is third doses, booster doses of vaccine, and the darker blue is the first dose of vaccine. Even after vaccine became available for kids ages 5 through 11, we're still seeing more people willing to get their booster dose than new people getting their first dose of vaccine. It's always going to be encouraging everyone to get vaccinated for COVID-19, including individuals down to age 5 and older. Let's talk about ages 5 through 11. Most kids in this age group have mild, maybe even asymptomatic disease. However, not all do. Some do get more serious illness. The Pfizer pediatric vaccine has proven itself. It's more than 90% efficacious in preventing any symptomatic disease. And I know the big concern has been the side effect of myocarditis and inflammation of the heart muscle. There were 0 cases of myocarditis in the safety study in this age group, but that's to be anticipated. Myocarditis is a rare event. We're talking even in the kids who are at highest risk, who are males ages 16 and 17, you still get 7 cases per 100,000 doses of vaccine. And in this age group, we would anticipate an even lower rate of vaccine-associated myocarditis, because all-cause myocarditis in this age group is rare. In contrast, the cardiac or heart damage of COVID-19, or that multi-inflammatory syndrome of children, those things are serious. There have been 94 children ages 5 through 11 in the United States who have died from COVID-19. There was a recent editorial in Science talking about the hesitancy that some parents have in getting their child vaccinated. And so they're saying that they are choosing not to take any risk by getting that child vaccinated. And the editorial pointed out that a choice not to get a vaccine is not a risk-free choice. Instead, it's a choice to take a different and more serious risk, a risk of your child having substantial disease from COVID-19. There's a big difference between being hospitalized for COVID and hospitalized for myocarditis. Hospitalization of a child age 5 through 11 and an intensive care unit stay, that's because they're on a machine. That's because they're on a ventilator or they need serious intervention. Hospitalization or an intensive care unit stay for myocarditis is for heart monitoring, for an arrhythmia. So when we weigh the risks and benefits around getting your child vaccinated, I want to point out that vaccination is the only prevention we have for ages 5 through 11 for preventing COVID and preventing serious disease. The new pills that are being explored, molnupiravir was just approved by FDA. It still needs to undergo review by CDC, but it will be available soon. It's only 30% efficacious in preventing hospitalization. Now, 30% is better than 0, but it's not going to be available for kids under age 12. It might not even be available for teenagers. Paxlovid, the Pfizer vaccine, that one is sorry for the misspelling there. And also, it's not going to be available for 5 through 11. It's highly efficacious for preventing hospitalization, but we don't have it yet. And same thing for monoclonal antibodies, not for kids. And even for adults, it's only 70% efficacious. Now, what's the deal with the Greek alphabet? Why Omicron? Each new variant as it arises has been given a new a Greek letter name as just a convention. And the last one was mu. And to avoid confusion with the English word new, the Greek letter nu was skipped. And chi would have been the next one. But chi is usually spelled XI, and that's a common Chinese name. So WHO decided to skip that Greek letter as well. The issue with Omicron, and the reason there is concern about Omicron, are the number of mutations. So let me just step back and review. I'm going to get a little technical here. You can either just, turn me off, but I think it's helpful to understand these technicalities when we start getting some information about this Omicron variant. A mutation is not like a monster. A mutation is a change in a single amino acid. Proteins are made up of strings of amino acids. For example, the D614G mutation means simply this, that a single amino acid, aspartate, changed to another amino acid, glycine, at position 614. sometimes these mutations are just random and don't mean anything. So the fact that Omicron has more than 30 mutations in the spike protein might not be as significant as we fear, but a number of these mutations have been seen in other variants. For example, in Alpha, in Delta, in Beta, and Gamma. What's different here in Omicron is we've never seen this many mutations in the spike protein. The spike protein has over 1,200 amino acids. There have been 32 mutations. So I just want to put this in perspective. This is worrisome, but it doesn't completely shoot all of our treatments out of the water. Again, this is highly technical. I put it there in case anybody wants to read more, that these are the things that scientists are saying. They're not just guesswork making these things up. Multiple mutations have been shown to have some resistance to antibodies. And so that's why we're worried that maybe monoclonal antibodies won't work. But the antibodies your body makes with vaccine, they're not just to single places. They make the antibodies to dozens, maybe hundreds of different places on the spike protein. So the fact that we've got multiple mutations, it may mean that there's more transmissible, that it spreads more easily. And we have some epidemiological evidence as well as biological evidence for this. So a number of these mutations look like they can be more spread more easily, increased infectivity. And this is a map of the variants in South Africa. You can see in orange more recently, Delta has been the predominant variant, but look at how quickly the Omicron, which is in blue variant, is catching up. So that's good evidence that this is more transmissible, will spread more easily. It's already widespread. It's in over 20 countries around the world. Those yellowish circles indicate confirmed transmission. The others are suspected transmission. So it's already widespread. So once again, just to summarize, there's some new mutations, some new combinations of mutations. The concern for increased transmission is serious. We've got lots of evidence for that. Monoclonal antibodies may be less effective. The good news is, so far, it looks like it does not cause more serious disease. It causes mild to moderate disease. There have been no deaths from Omicron as currently at the present time. Vaccine may be less effective, but they won't be completely ineffective. Like I said, the vaccine gives you antibodies that attach to multiple different places in the spike protein. So some places are blocked off because they're mutated. Vaccine will be effective against other places. Those two new medications, molnupiravir, Paxlovid, they're not available yet. They have some limited effectiveness, but they don't work on the spike protein. So they should be effective in preventing serious disease, even with the Omicron variant. And lastly, the beauty of the messenger RNA vaccine technology is that they can tweak their vaccines. They can tweak these vaccines. If it ends up that we need a booster against the Omicron variant, that should be available. They're already working on those. Both Pfizer and Merck have said that they think they could have large doses of vaccine specific to Omicron available within 100 days. There are some travel restrictions put in place. The US has put travel restrictions against travel from several of these countries. Though in Southern Africa, they may be removed because we know that already this variant is widespread, including in Canada, our neighbor to the north. It probably is here in the United States. CDC also plans to amend their testing order. So for people traveling internationally into the United States, that they should be tested and test negative 1 day before travel. And there's a new recommendation with regards to boosters. The recommendation now is that everyone age 18 and older should get their booster 6 months after the second dose. I know previously the recommendations had to do with immunocompromise, had to do with age, comorbid conditions. Now the recommendation is everybody should get their booster, age 18 and older. Pfizer is also pursuing approval for a booster for age 16 and 17. one concern people had about giving a booster, will the booster cause more myocarditis, just like the second dose causes more myocarditis than the third? Again, I have good news for you. This is out of Israel. Israel started giving booster doses August 1st, so they're a little bit ahead of the game from us. Their data indicates that the rate of myocarditis after the third dose is much lower. It's in between what the myocarditis rate for between the first dose and second dose. And that's probably to be expected because of the length of time. You get your booster 6 months after your second dose. Just want to put in a reminder, get your flu shot. You can get your flu shot and your booster on the same day. And I'll end with my email address in case I don't address your questions today, that you can always email me directly at kellejm1@dhec.sc.gov.
All right, Dr. Kelly, thank you for that most informative update. First question coming to you is coming from Emily, and she's asking how DHEC is testing for Omicron in South Carolina.
We are testing for Omicron. We test a random number of PCR tests that are sent in, but there's also a number of other partners around the state that are doing testing. For example, Medical University of South Carolina and Prisma Health both test every, they do the genetic sequence on every sample that they take. So so there's multiple places, other independent labs around the state are testing as well. We also send a certain number of samples, as do other states, to CDC. So there's multiple different layers of testing going on right now. And, in terms of treatment for Omicron, the disease does not appear to be that different, except that it's mild to moderate rather than seeing more serious disease. So the treatment would be the same. It wouldn't change our public health or our clinical actions, at least not at this time.
All right, thank you. David is asking if when parents are taking children in to receive the vaccine, are they being told that it's in clinical trials and hasn't been fully approved yet?
I think the consent form does indicate that it has been authorized for use, but has not met with full FDA approval as yet.
All right, and Taylor is asking, why does it seem like in some of the states with the tightest restrictions are having more cases than what South Carolina is with its current restrictions?
It is complicated. It's hard to understand the epidemiology of this virus. This is a really strange virus. I think we don't have experience with other viruses that have acted in this way, with these surges of up and down and up and down. That's very different than what we see, for example, with influenza every year. So there's still some things we don't understand. Part of it, though, is weather. We're blessed in South Carolina with warmer weather, so we've got more people who are doing things outdoors rather than indoors than, for example, our northern partners, where people are more likely to be indoors, and not just indoors, they're tightly insulated indoors with less ventilation circulating.
All right, our next question is from Rob, and Rob is asking, if I had side effects with the vaccine, can I expect them with the booster?
It looks like the amount of side effects on average that people experience with the booster is about the same as with their second dose. So of course, everybody's individual. One person might experience something different, but it's not apparent that people have more symptoms with the booster than they do with the second dose.
All right, Alice is asking if you think that Omicron will lead to herd immunity.
I think vaccination is what's going to lead to herd immunity, and certainly getting Omicron or getting any of the variants will give you a certain amount of protection against future variants. But I keep thinking, if you got, let's say, Alpha or even the Delta variant, how well does that protect you against Omicron? I don't know. We don't know that yet. Only time is going to tell.
You may have already addressed this question, but Adam is asking what percentage of South Carolinians have been vaccinated? Adult
50%.
South Carolinians.
Adults age, I know for age 12 and above, it is 58%. And it increases with increasing age, so that I know that more than 80% of adults in South Carolina age 65 and older have been vaccinated. That's the most vulnerable group. But overall, 12 and above, it's 58% fully vaccinated, meaning having had 2 doses.
Thank you for sharing that. Also, I want to remind our listeners that Dr. Kelly shared her email address, and other questions you can send directly to her. Dr. Kelly, we still have questions, but due to time, we need to move forward. But thank you again so much for that informative update. We didn't have you on last time, and I think we saw that leads to bad things when we don't have you on updating on what's going on.
Well, no one saw Omicron coming, so glad. Thank you very much for inviting me. Hopefully next time I can give you a more optimistic report.
All right, thank you. That was Dr. Jane Kelly, South Carolina epidemiologist with DHEC. We're going to transition now to closer to home. And we talked a little bit about workforce challenges, and wanted to have a company on today that's really one of the companies leading the way here locally on that, and that's the Sea Pines Resort. Tom Sullivan talked about workforce issues and some of the things that needed to happen. We know locally that housing is one of those things that needs to happen. And in the first quarter of 2022, several great initiatives that the Sea Pines Resort is currently undertaking will be coming to fruition. And very pleased to have Steve Birdwell on today, who's the president of the Sea Pines Resort, along with his colleague Cliff McMacken, to talk about the housing program that they have, what they'll be opening up in sometime probably in March, and then also to give us all an update on where they are with the renovation of the quarterdeck. Steve and Cliff, welcome, and we're delighted to hear from you today.
Thank you so much, Bill, for having us this morning, and hope everyone had a very nice Thanksgiving holiday. Well, we're excited to provide a quick update on 2 exciting projects we have underway: the quarterdeck, our new quarterdeck in Harbortown, and then our workforce housing project. And Cliff's going to tell us more about it and share our screen, but I will say that both projects are making good progress and are scheduled for reopening and finishing and completion in the spring, this coming spring.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to share some photos here, some progress photos that are loading. Yeah, so first I'll talk about our Sea Pines employee housing. This project is it's 16 3-bedroom units. And will provide housing for up to 96 Sea Pines employees. As you can see, we're well underway, more than 50% complete. The roof has been installed. Windows are going in, long-awaited windows, I might add. Some supply chain issues we've had on all these projects, but we've overcome them. And so I was glad to hear from Tom and Neil that there are some solutions and strategies going into place for next year to try to prevent those types of things. I will add that, there is an economy of scale. And while, when you're buying 48 shower tubs, you do get a little bit of preferential treatment when sourcing that many items. So that's been helpful. We've got some, well, let's see, before we go, I'll show you on our screen here. We have, this is the main lodging building where the 16 3-bedroom units are housed. And then over on the edge here, we have a clubhouse for communal activities and just gathering of the tenants. Where the construction trailer and some things are now will be a grass lawn for recreation. So we're excited to have, really not just a place to sleep, but, a place to have community. Other pictures show, we've got the windows going in. Building wrap siding will be starting this week. And down below, you can see a typical bedroom. These bedrooms are sized for market, rentals, really. So what you're going to see when you go into these is a real true 3-bedroom market ready product. Up above, you can see one of those 48 shower tubs that's getting moved around the building and installed. And then down below, you can see there's the clubhouse. It's an open floor plan concept with a large kitchen and living room space and vaulted ceilings. So that's the quick update on the housing project. As Steve said, we're targeting a spring opening and occupying of CPI's employees. So very excited about that.
Cliff, just wanted to mention, this project is going in right across the street from Captain Woody's. You may have seen it. It's taken up a part of the parcel, but we own 5 additional acres that join this project. And we have the ability to add many more units if this is deemed successful and we decide to move forward with additional housing units.
That's right, exactly. So it's good. We're set for the future. Moving on to the second update, we have our quarterdeck replacement. First, I have on the screen here is floor plans. I'll start with the first floor. It's a 500-seat restaurant and an oyster rooftop bar with a fresh seafood market. The primary restaurant element is on this side of the building. And just to get your bearings, up top is the Calabogie Sound. To your left is Harbortown Golf Links. And to the bottom side is the marina. Over on the right-hand side is the fresh seafood market. And, we're really excited about this new element. It's going to give us the opportunity to sell and offer fresh raw seafood, as well as small lunch items such as mahi tacos and oyster po' boys and other elements that might be local to our environment here, community here. Packaged products that are local as well, and then 16 flavors of ice cream. So we see this market being very active all throughout the day and especially in the evening. Then over on the left side is we can see there's a captain's bar in the main restaurant space interior, as well as an umbrella bar that's a lot more casual that sits outside. So lots of activity. The entertainment is really focused on this side down near the harbor master's office. So a real buzz occurring on this side with tremendous views. We'll get to see some of those in the upcoming pictures. The rooftop, this is again, primary concept is an oyster bar. We've got a large circular bar that will be the feature of the space. But all of these windows around the entire perimeter of the rooftop area will open. Large accordion glass partitions, so you get cross breezes in the evenings. Sights and sounds of being outside, as well as the decks. These rooftop decks are spectacular views, and just going to add a really new dynamic experience to dining at the quarterdeck. So progress is well underway. This is a rendering that we had done of the market elevation. So this is over on the sort of the north elevation. And this is an image of what's there today. So you can see well underway. We've got brick base is completed on most of the building. And the workers are prepping for the skin, which is a tabby stucco and wood trim around the windows of this elevation. So lots of progress there. Next, this is a rendering we had done of the main dining level, the captain's bar. And then you can see in interior, we've got drywall ceilings, framing is going into place. But one thing that you can't help but notice when you're in these spaces are just the dynamic views. This one shows the 18th green over to your left. And then the Calabogie Sound as it meshes with that golf in a marsh setting. This is a rendering we had done of the oyster rooftop bar, and then this is a picture of that space. We've got some of these openings plugged up. Now this will be a window that will be operable, so that will be completely open, viewing the Calabogie Sound. So I tried to kind of jump around a little bit and give you an idea of the progress and the views that will be had with a number of photographs here. So this is that outdoor rooftop area that overlooks the sound, as well as golf to our left. And you can see the concrete structures are all completed. Scaffolding is erected on the right side for skin. tabby stucco and wood siding. This is an elevation looking really back towards Bull Island. So it's more than 270-degree views, and it's hard to capture with one still frame. This is an image looking back towards Harbortown Golf Links. You can see that that the elevation change really creates a new experience from the view standpoint. And funny enough, it's hard to take pictures on site without catching some of the construction workers enjoying the views as well. And another view from on the harbor side, looking back. This is one of my favorite views, is a rooftop dining terrace that looks up at the lighthouse. So very iconic, new experience for that space. So that's a quick update on our projects. As we've said, both are scheduled to open this spring. And, you know, as we're looking at another very busy season, you know, it's only going to be amplified by the addition of these two projects coming online.
So we're excited, Bill. It's we've got another big staffing challenge here with the quarterdeck. So anybody that would love to join our team, we would love to talk with you.
All right, Steve and Cliff, thank you so much. I can share with our listeners that the two of you were kind enough to host our team down at the new quarterdeck, and the views are second to none. You will be amazed the way that they've constructed this building to be able to incorporate the wonderful views and being able to see the golf course and the water, and it will be a phenomenal facility. If you guys have time for a couple of questions, would appreciate that. I know, Steve, you moved a meeting around for us, and we appreciate that as well. But the first question is, if you anticipate there at the quarterdeck having corporate groups as well as those vacationers dining, and this is coming to us from Kevin.
Yes, we expect that we're going to have a lot of use from our corporate groups, and you know, we're going to try to somewhat limit that. We did build a multi-purpose room that can host, I don't know, 60, 70 people, I think, Cliff, for dinner. If we have larger than that, we'll have to close part of the dining space, but we're expecting to have both, you know, casual diners and corporate groups as well.
Thank you to Sea Pines Resort and the Riverstone Group for your investment in Sea Pines and in the Hilton Head Island community. So I know there are many, including me and many others, that share those thoughts as well. Moving on with Ellen, and Ellen's asking about the workforce housing with the new beds that you're developing there. Will that alleviate your need for additional beds in the area, or will there still be a need for workforce beds, or essential beds, I like to call them?
Well, this will be replacing some apartments and other facilities that we rent currently. We'll open those up to others to be able to utilize. But ours, this first phase will really be utilized probably mainly by some of our international workers that join us each year, the H-2B workers that we have that come from Jamaica and others. And there'll be plenty of additional uses and needs, I think, in the future. And that's why we bought the 6.5 acre parcel that we purchased. And I fully expect that we're going to be moving into another phase of workforce development housing in the future.
As you said, that does open another 96 beds on the island for additional workers. So that's terrific. And then Cliff, as you were talking about the clubhouse and the gathering area, and I think that's so important that was incorporated into your thought process of being able to have that in the housing program. And I'm sure that will be very valuable to all your workers that are staying there.
I think it'll be well used.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think the clubhouse will be well used. It'll be a great gathering point for, you know, the residents of the housing project, and I think that they'll really appreciate the use of that. And
let's switch gears to the Inn at Harbor Town, and any upgrades planned for that?
We are launching into a major refresh at the inn. And the hotel is going to be closed for about 3 weeks, maybe 3.5 weeks in January, as we install new flooring, new wood flooring, new carpeting. We've got some furnishings that are going into various parts of the hotel. We're making some improvements to the bathrooms, the guest bathrooms, and the HVAC systems. We've got a new big generator that we're installing to alleviate any problems with any power disruptions that we may have at the hotel. So there's about $2 million worth of improvements that are going to be made to the inn this winter. So we're
Steve,
excited about that.
On behalf of the chamber, we want to thank you for your commitment to excellence, Sea Pines Resort's commitment to excellence here on the island, not only with the existing product that you have, but with the new product that you're bringing to market. So thank you to both you and Cliff for being with us today, and we look forward to an exciting 2022 moving forward with partnering with the Sea Pines Resort.
Great, thank you, Bill, and happy holidays, everyone.
All right, that was Steve Birdwell and Cliff McMacken with the Sea Pines Resort, giving us a great update on their new projects that they have going on. I want to remind everybody to please be sure to tune in on December the 15th. We'll be back at you again with more relevant information with all that we have going on. We thought it was very, very important to touch base at least one more time before the new year. And I was talking to some people yesterday and talking about as we're finishing out the year, there are those that are simply winding things down into the holidays, and then those who are really pressing forward. And I would encourage each of you in your business to continue to press forward for this month, because there's lots of good things that can be done in the next 24 to 28 days of December. And as we close, I'm going to just leave with you to remind you to please, please, please be kind and be patient, as well as don't forget to love each other. Thank you for supporting your Chamber of Commerce. We're grateful for that, and we'll be back at you on December the 15th.